Hey everybody, this is Jonathan Schrantz, and today I'm very excited to share with you guys a very cool, sneaky surprise weapon that you guys can play against the Queen's Gambit Accepted. I'm talking about the Billinger Gambit. I doubt you've ever heard of it. I doubt any of your opponents ever have. So this one is going to have a huge amount of surprise value. You get the initiative right away by borrowing some of the ideas from the Ortho-Schnapp Gambit against the French defense. And what's maybe the best selling point of all, it's actually completely sound. I think with best play, black is going to end up with an equal position. So there's not a whole lot that you're risking here by playing this way, and you have some huge potential for tricking somebody that plays the Queen's Gambit Accepted. So to cover this one, I actually want to show you guys first a game that I played against a viewer. I play on Twitch. I play against viewers all the time. My name is Vampire Chicken. You can come and follow me. I stream 3 or 4 times a week. Link is in the description below. So come and follow me so you can see a lot of these cool ideas. I usually like to play them out against viewers just to get kind of a feel for them. And a lot of the openings you're only going to see if you come and follow me live. You're going to see a lot of these firsthand. So I was playing a 1900 rated player, and he did take my pawn. So for a lot of people, when you're a d4, c4 player, even at a relatively higher level, you don't really have anything against the Queen's Gambit Accepted. It's actually a reasonable opening for black. A lot more players might want to consider it. But if you just need the simple recipe, a quick antidote, here's the way to do it. Play the move pawn to e3. That's what I played in the game. And the reason that people are told you want to start with knight to f3 is because now you've allowed black to play this move pawn to e5. So this is kind of the known recipe for if they don't play knight to f3, if you're a QGA player, just play e5, give white an isolated queen pawn, and take it from there. It's well known that taking here and exchanging queens is actually good for black. So bishop takes c4 is the main way of playing. And after e takes d4, you can kind of get an idea. Most sane people, reasonable people here, they've played e takes d4. That seems super logical, right? Just take it back with the pawn. I'm proposing here today, we play this crazy move, queen to b3. Immediately just ignoring what's going on in the center and attacking f7 right away, forcing black to already make some decisions early on in this opening. And take a note of this pawn structure. So we got this pawn here on e3, and there's no pawn on d2. I want to really quick compare this to the Ortho-Schnapp Gambit. This is an opening that you can play against the French defense, where in this position, very similar, you can also play queen to b3, and now bishop to c4. And this, if you turn the computer on, is actually not that great for white. However, even this has a lot of potential to trick your opponents because the ideas are the same. White is going to develop the pieces as quickly as possible, get everything out, castle, and try to punish black right away. But just checking the engine evaluation, you can kind of see maybe this is a little bit dubious for white. Maybe that's not your style. So if we come back, this exact line, but against the Queen's Gambit Accept, this is definitely not as severe as the evaluation that the computer gave against the Ortho-Schnapp, and a good part of that reason is simply the pawn structure. The pawn here on e3 is much better than having a pawn on d2, and one of the reasons is if you just simply take here, eventually white will just be able to take back, at least developing yet another piece, which is going to be the integral part of the strategy. White should every single move try to develop more pieces and try to get some sort of an attack. And black is going to have to play some inconvenient moves here. My opponent played what I do think is the best move, queen to e7. Somehow you do need to be able to protect the f-pawn, so this is a very reasonable way of doing it. Now, white might be tempted to play a move like knight to f3. That's not what I played in the game, because knight to f3 does allow this move queen to b4, trading off the queens, which is really not in white's best interest. We didn't play this to trade the queens. So I am proposing this move, pawn to a3. And this is the move that actually categorizes the Billinger Gambit. So now we have it here. There's 2 games in the database with the Billinger, and therefore, I mean, really nobody's going to be ready for this or have any prep whatsoever. And black is going to have to figure out a lot of stuff for the first time when they meet this on the board. But a3, can white really play like this? Can you really just waste time to prevent this queen move? Well, I really think that you can. And we can take a look at a lot of other moves, but knight to c6 is what was played. We'll come back, and I think knight to c6 actually might be the only real try for black. We'll come back and we'll look at a few other reasonable options for black. But knight to c6 I do think is the best way to go. And the real question for black is, can you play bishop to d7 and knight to a5? In the game, after I played knight to f3, developing a piece, that's always going to be the priority. My opponent here already made a little bit of a mistake and played this move knight to a5. This is obviously the idea, but without this bishop already on d7, white can now play queen to a4. So what my opponent really should have done is they should have started with bishop to d7. However, this is really hard. If you get in the mind of the player as black, this is a hard decision to make, especially, this was a blitz game, this was a 3-minute game. My opponent has to ask themselves, am I just going to take on b7? And here, it actually doesn't work. White is doing well after a move like just castles. Black might be able to go and win the bishop pair somehow, some way, but this also is going to lead to a position where white has a lot more development, and this is still totally fine for white. All of that being said, in this position, black actually can allow white to take on b7, and it doesn't work, but it's not so obvious exactly how black ought to punish this. But I will show it to you. White should definitely not take on b7, because after rook to b8, it looks like maybe white, yet again, can grab another pawn. The b pawn is protected, so maybe it looks like nothing is going on here. However, the problem for white is these two bishops lined up on the c-file. So here, rook to c8 is actually a very dangerous move. White can even escape with the queen and go all the way back, but now comes the move knight to a5, and we begin to see the problem. These bishops are lined up on the same file, so there's not one way to move the other. You move one bishop, you lose another bishop, and a move like b3 also will tactically fail to a move like knight to b3, where yet again you can't really take here, or just horrible stuff is about to happen to you. So not easy to see, though. I don't think this is an easy decision for black. It's the move that they want to play, so maybe in longer games they can sit and figure it all out, but you do have to see that after you're capturing here, they go first here, and then that there's this big problem on this file. What is actually kind of funny, too, I'm just going to point it out now, is one other computer suggestion in this move, in this position, is actually the move knight to e2, which has the idea not only of maybe taking here, but also of defending the bishop here. So knight to e2 is also a funny computer move that could be considered seriously, because, yeah, in this line exactly here, you now can take here. The idea is that the bishop is protected. So that's a funny move, but in our game, knight to a5 was played. Here, queen to a4, and now it's becoming obvious that you don't have time to block with the knight hanging, so now the knight simply needs to retreat. With this, I decided now to castle. It's all about speed and development, so I'm trying to do that as fast as possible. My opponent played d3. This is a bit slow. I have no intentions of going back. I am only going to go forward. I'm going to keep developing until I have an overwhelming initiative. And I played this move, knight to c3. And now my knight is getting ready to enter the game. The knight also supports maybe an e4 push, and maybe the knight will be able to hop all over the place. Now comes knight to f6. This seems reasonable, but it doesn't stop pawn to e4. The idea being you simply cannot take this pawn, and I also want to threaten to play bishop to f4, which will help me when my knight starts hopping around. The obvious idea is that if you do go for this, I have rook to e1 at the end, and with the queen and king on the same rank, on the same file, that this actually does usually end up being pretty bad for the second player. So e4, just kind of a free move. I'm going to develop my bishop to the ideal square and continue the game from there. Bishop to d7 comes. This is very good. Now black is potentially threatening to move this knight away with the discovery on my queen. I decided to take this opportunity to hop in. I was thinking to myself during the game, not only am I threatening here, but now if the queen has to back up, that's obviously going to make it hard for you to castle over there. And if you do castle, perhaps this a pawn is going to be hanging at the end of all of it. So my opponent now took the time to play this move, knight to e5, which probably actually is the best move in the position. Here, I decided to grab this pawn. I think the computer suggestion is very similar. Bishop to f4. I would have played this only for the sake that it is developing yet another piece, but my move was okay. I took this pawn, and after the king attacked me, I went back. And here, this actually gives black one option to potentially save this game if black can find this very hard to find move, rook to c8, with the idea of you're putting a lot of pressure on this bishop. He very well might be able to save this one, and maybe this has a little bit extra protection of the c7 square, just in case I ever give a check and I try to drive a knight here. It's nice to have a rook, perhaps. So rook to c8 possibly gave my opponent one escape in this game, but after knight takes f3, he is now totally lost. I just simply take back. And after a6, this really hastens the defeat. I kind of saw in my mind, you can never really play this because queen a5. So queen a5 came. If you walk this way, you walk into mate in 1. He decided to go the other way, but now he's in this tremendously horrible windmill. So yeah, here my opponent did in fact resign. Obviously, if you go here, I'm grabbing this rook. It's enough to know that this is winning, but there's actually a checkmate here, which is kind of unusual. It's kind of funny. So these windmills are always a lot of fun. I need to take this a pawn for the actual mating attack to work. The idea being that after we do this series of checks, I actually can get back on this file, and then black can give away some pieces and whatever, but it should end in checkmate. So that nice little windmill there to end the game. So I really thought that was kind of a good illustration of how this opening can work. Really quick, I just want to show you. Look at all my pieces. They come out very quickly. I just get all the stuff out. I used all my pieces, and eventually he didn't get to use his stuff. It's really hard for black to find it, so if he makes too many moves with the same pieces, you can really overwhelm them. So heading back, though, I do want to run back through this and take a look here at some of the other possibilities. A lot of these are just ideas that I've kind of come up with on my own, because there's not a whole lot of support in the database for this position here. I do want to briefly mention that another interesting way of defending this pawn is with queen to d7. This is kind of a normal enough idea in the ortho schnapp. Not only are you defending here, but it also has another sneaky idea that now knight to c6 possibly does allow knight to a5 right away, because in that variation there'd be no queen to a4. So the queen is kind of acting like the bishop, and perhaps black will now try to prioritize castling on the king side. If your opponent does play this way, I would recommend playing knight to f3 if black follows up with kind of the logical idea knight to c6. Here, in exactly this position, obviously white could maybe castle and give up the bishop pair, but you don't really have to. In this position, you can play e takes d4, and now after knight to a5, you actually have a way with this e-file being opened up of playing queen to e3. So this will force the queen back to e7, and now we can safely put our bishop somewhere. One other little subtle nuance, you can actually also play the move bishop to b5. This is an interesting idea, trying to provoke c6. If you want to argue that wherever you put your bishop now, this knight is actually a little bit more misplaced now that it can't go to the c6 square. So that's one interesting variation, and this should actually end up being very good for white. So we'll head back now, and I think for that reason, black should prefer to put the queen on e7. And again, we're going to play a3 with the idea of preventing queen to b4. And now after knight to c6, which I think is again the only option, we will look at a few traps here. If d takes e3 in this position, this is actually exactly what white wants. This is actually a really bad mistake by black. Obviously, we can continue by developing with our bishop here. And now if, for example, black does play in kind of a normal fashion, you play with knight c6 and bishop to d7, well, here we definitely can take on b2. There's not going to be any tricks on the c-file now that the bishop has already moved. So in some variation like this, there's not going to be any tricks. The queen can go away somewhere on this diagonal, possibly here to meet this with this, but we're kind of really getting into some deep stuff here. But essentially, it just doesn't work out for black. I also want to point out this very real possibility, and in the game, I had intended on playing in this position knight to f3. I don't know if this is actually stronger, but it does set a very beautiful idea up of just again saying, I dare you to be greedy, I dare you to take my pawn on f2, and in this position, white can just simply take back with the king. Now, it turns out maybe, it's not good, but maybe black can hold on here with a very particular defense, but it's not going to be easy. The e-file is now open, so rook to e1 is coming up very fast here. The computer spots the only possible move here, which is queen to c5, which is forcing us to develop a piece, so it can't possibly be that good. And now queen to f5. And that's how the computer decides to defend this pawn, but this looks horrific. White can follow up with rook to e1 or knight to c3, and probably a lot of bad stuff is about to happen to black. They can try to hang on like this, but I doubt anybody would actually want that position with black. So taking right away, that's just very greedy. And the problem with knight to f6 is that it actually doesn't really accomplish that much. It does make black a little bit closer to castling on the king side, but you're not really going to be able to with the queen on e7. So white can actually just play a normal move, and now maybe black needs to go back to the other plan with knight to c6 followed by bishop to d7. So this is honestly not really working out. This actually is just kind of a slow move, and white will just play kind of normal, get castled, and there shouldn't really be any problems. So we'll take one last look here to see if there's any other lines we should be looking at. Knight to c6, knight f3, and yeah, again, what black really should be prioritizing here is bishop to d7, where white should simply probably get castled, and the game will continue. Again, there's not a whole lot of games here, so you're welcome to get on a computer and kind of mess around with this as much as you guys like. But that's the Billinger Gambit in a nutshell there. There's not a whole lot of theory, but there's a lot of very interesting ideas, and there's a lot of room for improving the theory here. So I want to put this out on the radar, so hopefully you guys play it. If you get a Billinger's Gambit game, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to review it. I'll review it live on Twitch. Just come and find me and let me know that you got a big win or whatever happened with your games in this very cool Gambit. Let me know what you think of it. Would you guys be willing to play this way as white? I really think it's a cool and fun opening. So if you like this video, please leave a like, share it around, and come follow me on Twitch so that you can see this stuff when I do it all live. Thank you guys for watching.